I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Patricia Ho, General Counsel of Scroll. Patricia, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Ashton. It's great to talk to you, and thanks for having me here.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to dive into the regulatory environments of cryptocurrency, not just in the US, Hong Kong, Singapore, London, all around the world. I know you're very tuned in with that, and there's a lot of updates happening as crypto becomes more mainstream. It's hard to follow along unless you're really paying attention like you are, and that's part of your job at Scroll as well, I know. Would love to hear, first of all, before we dive into the whole world, a little bit about yourself, Scroll, maybe what is Scroll for those who aren't familiar, and your role there as General Counsel, and then we can dive into all the latest updates.
Sure. Thank you, Ashton. So a little bit about Scroll. Scroll is actually a layer 2 rollup scaling solution for Ethereum. So we use what we call zero knowledge proof technology to scale the use of Ethereum to make it cheaper and faster for developers and users to interact and basically build their decentralized applications on Ethereum. Now, my name is Patricia. As you've mentioned, I'm based in Hong Kong, spent a lot of time in Asia, worked sort of everywhere, globally, London, US, other parts of Asia as well in my career. Before Scroll, I was actually at one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. I was at OKX. And prior to that, I was in fintech with WeLab, one of the unicorn digital banking and digital lending platform out here in Asia. And I actually come from a traditional finance background and trained as a lawyer back in London during the global financial crisis. So very interesting times, particularly when we think about a lot of what we're going through in the past year in crypto. Sort of reminds me of the time back in 08, 09, when the traditional financial system was also coming through with their difficulties. So that's a little bit about myself. I think crypto is a super interesting space, particularly with people from TradFi. I think there's a lot of opportunities for people like us to contribute.
Very cool. Thank you, Patricia. And yeah, I feel like right now is a great time to be paying attention. As you mentioned, I think more people in TradFi are starting to pay attention, especially with the ETF news and other traditional financial vehicles coming in to Bitcoin and the crypto space. And with that also comes regulation. And now I think at the forefront of the regulatory news is sort of the US, although it's not the entire world. There are many other parts of innovation happening, but the US seems to have a lot of media around it. I'm guessing that you've been paying attention to the regulatory environments in the US, what's happening. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what are the most important topics right now for regulation in the US.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, crypto is really a global business. And with a project like Scroll, we're open source from day one. And our team is decentralized across like many different time zones. So there's really no, one country or one market or one continent even that we focus our efforts. And that comes with just being, very importantly, we have to be on top of all the regulatory developments around the world. Now, US is very, very interesting because I would say it's been leading the innovation and the technology in the decentralized finance space and the blockchain technology space. What has been a bit less fortunate is really the regulatory uncertainty that we've been seeing in the past year and a half. And we see that in very high profile news like the FTX trials and numerous enforcement actions that we see both the SEC and the CFTC taking against both really large platforms like Coinbase and Binance, as well as the smaller projects, the libraries of the world. And I think it's quite unfortunate because it does have an impeding impact on the innovation. A lot of project teams I talk to that are based out in the US, frankly speaking, they're a little bit cautious about being very high profile in what they're developing. They would, think about whether they need to block US users onto their apps. And that creates a very strange situation because they want to build something, but they find that whatever they build may not be suitable for the US market. And I feel that they're also looking for other ways to grow their protocol, particularly, going to the European market, coming out to Asia. So I'm certainly seeing a lot of project teams coming to Asia, both Hong Kong and Singapore, in the past 3 to 6 months, just exploring opportunities to set up here. A little bit more on the regulations. I think, for example, cases like Ripple, cases like Uniswap, these are enforcement cases that have been sort of dominating the news in the past few months. Some of them are more easy to understand than others. And for the Ripple case, they make a bifurcated decision against whether something is offered to institutional investors on a primary basis or offered to retail investors on a secondary exchange, right? That is, in a sense, not really that logical. Because if you apply the US Howey test to determine what is a securities, it doesn't quite make that distinction between whether something is a primary offer or a secondary transaction. And I'm afraid that some of these decisions leave project teams or other people in the industry with some uncertainty about how to plan forward in terms of taking their project next step further, right? Like, are they going to potentially get into trouble or not? Some of the bigger platforms like Coinbase, they've been engaging with regulators for many years and very vocal about it, but even they're not spared from a lot of the SEC enforcements. And for example, their staking as a service that has been alleged by the SEC as offering securities. And that's also very difficult for the industry to again move forward on whether they should do more on staking or whether they should step back. So I'm just going to pause here. I think the state of the US is difficult, and I personally don't think there will be much more clarity coming out until probably the election and Congress basically being able to make clearer laws, which of course takes some time.
Yeah, no, great points, Patricia. And I did see some news this week about Biden saying to Congress that not necessarily, we need to look at the regulatory environment more, just we need to crack down more, which could mean anything, but it seems so far that it's sort of meaning crack down in the wrong areas, as we've seen with Coinbase, Ripple, Uniswap, or Library, the example that you gave, all very legitimate companies that are bringing innovation to the financial world. And meanwhile, it looks like we've seen justice with FTX, but there was also, throughout 2022, a lot of other breakdowns of companies, Celsius, Voyager, etc., that their names had almost never been spoken, and they were the ones who seemed to have done the most wrongdoing on their customers and on U.S. citizens and residents. And they seemed to focus on Library, who had done nothing wrong at all. And I feel like that's part of the reason why a lot of these new companies, as you're saying, they're looking at other markets to start expanding, because even if they're doing everything right, they don't want to have to go through the scrutiny of the SEC coming at them because they're targeting the wrong actors.
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is unfortunately the consequence of having a series of enforcement action and potentially not very logical from legal principle basis or decisions coming to light. I think with some of the bad players like FTX of the world, right, there's clearly a fraudulent element to the operations. And, I do agree with the prosecutors that, when it's a fraudulent operation, it doesn't matter whether you're in crypto or any other industry, the frauds are just something that we need to protect all investors against. So it's a bit unfortunate that, it's given crypto and the other good builders in crypto a bit of a hard time. Just by association of being in the same industry. And I hope that, with the FTX trials now being more settled, at least until March, we'll get the sentencing. But it's sort of the initial sort of excitement and focus has gone down now. So I hope that the industry can go back to building and also stay tuned of the opportunities that, are around globally. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
And for the companies, at least, if they move, I've seen even with Coinbase, I believe, was moving part of their operations overseas. It's not like, they can still service most of the world minus the US if they want to play it safe. But I know a lot of companies are going to Singapore and Hong Kong, where you are, and you're probably familiar with that. Can you talk about the environment there and maybe why are they choosing to go there? And what is it like for them if they go there? Is it the opposite, where they're just like, open the doors and please come in and we want your business?
Actually, it is a bit like that, Ashton. No exaggeration intended at all. And it's my observation. It's also shared by a lot of friends that have come here from Europe and the US in the past few months. So I think let's start from the beginning. So Hong Kong last year in October basically came out with a government policy to support Hong Kong becoming the next global hub for virtual assets. So with a coordinated effort, it's between the policymakers, the government, the regulators, as well as like the ecosystem. So they're really encouraging businesses, Web3 businesses, virtual asset businesses to come and set up. So with that, you already have a much more friendly sort of welcome. And I can tell you that it is actually very accessible to have meetings with the regulators in Hong Kong. So the Securities and Futures Commission, which is the securities regulator, as well as the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, which is going to be the stablecoin regulator. And I think there is a recognition that the industry is growing at a very quick, innovative pace. And the regulators therefore want to talk to the market participant to understand DeFi a lot better, to understand like what is the need for liquidity, and to understand how is that different from traditional financial institutions, and what are some of the bridges, the gaps that the crypto industry can work with the traditional industry. So in the conversations I've participated, for example, with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority on stablecoins, have been very open and transparent discussions. So that's one thing that has been very, very encouraging. And on the regulation side, actually, there's been a lot of work already done as well. So Hong Kong already has enacted a virtual asset services provider regime in June of this year. This allows crypto trading platforms to come and apply for a license to operate in the city. Now, this is also open to retail investors as well. So it's very clear that, if you want to offer a centralized exchange, there's an avenue for you to do this with regulatory recognition. Obviously, there's a lot of custody requirements, segregation of client assets. There's also a lot of policies and procedures, risk management, all the stuff that you would expect from a fully fledged regulatory regime. But at least there is a way, and it's very clear, and how you get there.
That's really good to hear. And two things you mentioned there were about DeFi and stablecoins as well. I feel like there's a growing transition from centralized trading platforms, which obviously have to follow all the rules. And then when you throw in DeFi and decentralized trading, there's slight differences on how those platforms work. And if there's not as many centralized parties that are there to help control the assets for you, but the protocol probably still has to follow some rules. And of course, with DeFi, if you want to mitigate risk, stablecoins are a really nice add-on to ensure that you're not taking too much risk. And I feel like there's probably a lot of regulation. Most people don't know the inner workings of the regulation around stablecoins, but obviously you want to make sure that they're stable and the proper assets are backing them as well. Maybe you can talk about the stablecoins and DeFi part of it and what sort of applies in terms of regulation, what's needed for those two parts of the industry to grow.
Sure, yeah. Stablecoin is a really hot topic, and it's a really important one because I feel that it is going to be that catalyst to bring on the next billion of users, including bring on all the TradFi, bring on all the fintech guys into the crypto space. It's also critically important in terms of being a trading pair for crypto assets. Mm-hmm. So a little bit around how regulators are thinking about stablecoins. I think in Hong Kong, Singapore, and also the UK, there are already differing levels of government policy supporting a stablecoin regime. So Singapore announced a framework. Hong Kong for licensed Singapore stablecoins. Hong Kong is due to announce a consultation on Hong Kong dollar stablecoin, and UK end of October also announced their plan for UK stablecoin to be used as a means of retail payment. So you can see that, we're starting from, I guess, the simplest form of stablecoin. These are stablecoins that are referenced to fiat currency, and they are fully backed by reserved assets. So to your point about maintaining stability, I think regulators are starting with, the safest sort of types of stablecoins, the ones that you can point to full backing reserves, so to maintain the stability between the stablecoin value and the underlying assets value.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there about the UK and Europe as well. Obviously that's a huge market, and that there's a lot of countries that sort of need to communicate and get on the same page so that they can hopefully stay up to the innovation of what we're seeing in Southeast Asia. I'm curious in where the innovation is being led in Europe, and how far along are they compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, so I think that London is becoming a hub for some crypto projects. I think France is as well, although France, I think being part of the European Union, obviously they have their own comprehensive regime on MiCA, which is also by phase, and it's quite rigorous regulatory standards. So I think also, elsewhere around in Europe, I do think that UK is going to be one of the innovative centers. It also benefits from being traditionally a major international financial center, because stable coins, to make something sustainable and used by many people, it's about liquidity. So you do need a very deep liquidity and trading market for that stable coin to take off and be widely adopted.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point. I feel like right now there's also a rise in people are looking for other ways to innovate stablecoins. I'm not sure if it needs innovation. There's USDT Tether and USDC Circle as sort of the main ones, but there's also movements saying, we don't agree with the companies that are running them, and we want to make decentralized stablecoins, or we want to experiment with ways to back other assets, or maybe make buoyant stablecoins so that it's not like the US dollar being depreciated over the years. How can we sort of make it truly stable and not according to the US inflation? I'm curious if you know anything about the future of stablecoins, and do you think that the two main stablecoins that we see right now will be the main ones for years to come?
That's a really interesting question. I think when I look at USDC or Circle, and I look at Tether and sort of the different paths they've taken, it is a very different approach. I think it is quite I think it's quite obvious that Circle is going down the license route. They're very engaging with a number of regulators globally. They're also engaging with regulators in various markets in Asia, and they want to serve the TradFi. They want to work with the institutions and be able to, increase the adoption of USDC. USDT Tether actually is the most used stablecoin from a crypto native perspective. So a lot of the DeFi protocols and also a lot of the trading pairs are actually, using USDT. And I think they're also becoming more visible, I would say, with their recent CEO, being appointed, Paolo, who was their previous CTO. So I think time will tell in terms of whether they also go down a more regulated path or they continue what they're doing now, which is really great. I mean, they're very, very impactful from a crypto native ecosystem perspective. Now, to your point about whether those are the two dominant stablecoins going forward, I don't know, but I would think that there is space for innovation for not just fiat referenced stablecoins. For example, we can see DAI, the MakerDAO stablecoins, and other even Curve, that their stablecoins. There's a lot of innovation in terms of the stabilization mechanism. Where I'm coming from is that the regulators are not ready to give regulatory recognition on these sort of algorithmic stablecoins just yet. I think part of the reason is also with Luna, the collapse of Luna last year. So I think we need to give them a little bit more time to really kind of battle test some of these stabilizing mechanisms in order for them to get comfortable. But this is one area, for example, where I think the Hong Kong regulators are very, very open to discussions and learning about what works, what doesn't work, and to work with the industry to find a way.
Great insights. And we've sort of talked a little bit about most of the parts of the world. There's one other one that I want to touch on that is a very growing space, is Dubai in the Middle East. Seems to be, I'm seeing so many giant blockchain conferences there. I know they have innovation zones and great company setups for blockchain companies. What do you think about them as an up-and-coming space for the blockchain startups and the regulatory environment there in the Middle East?
I am very bullish on the Middle East. There is actually a Ripple conference that is going on right now, Ripple Metaco, and they have actually today announced a partnership with HSBC as well. So really going into the institutional space and helping institutional adoption of crypto assets and stablecoins. I think Dubai, from a regulatory environment perspective, is extremely open. So they have set up VARA, which is their Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, not very long ago. And again, they are highly engaging with the industries. I have many friends and contacts that are having regular roundtables in Dubai with the regulators. They are, engaging with not just centralized exchange, but also custodians. So they have a number of different types of licenses already. So it's a very ready-made regime already. And I believe there's a lot of excitement about people setting up in Dubai and also Abu Dhabi as well. So it's the entire GCC, the Gulf region is becoming quite a hub for major talents and also major crypto platforms to set up shop.
That's great to know. And if you were to go and start a Web3 company and you weren't located anywhere specifically, where would you go to do that? Would it be Hong Kong?
I would definitely be in Asia or the Middle East, because I think that there is really a lot of tailwind in this part of the world. And there's a lot of room for experimentation. So it's sort of a very open kind of environment where you feel that you can test a lot of things out, especially if you are starting your own project. You sometimes want to test different ideas. You want to fail fast. You want to know, what are things I can improve on to iterate on that product. And I think this is the best place to do it with that level of engagement with regulators and the industry as well.
Very cool, Patricia. I appreciate all the insights into the whole world. It's hard enough to follow along with the U.S. news when you're focused on so many other parts of the industry. So I appreciate your expertise in all of it. What is the best way for people to follow along with this or your work or Scroll?
Yeah, so definitely follow Scroll on X or Twitter. It's Scroll ZKP. And I am also on LinkedIn. I write prolifically about regulatory developments around the world. So I just recently wrote a piece about tokenized securities, which was something that came out about 6 days ago in Hong Kong. So if you're interested in real-world asset tokenization and what are the regulations in Hong Kong about that, feel free to follow me. I'll soon be writing more about stablecoins as well as the Hong Kong regime comes into play later this month.
Very cool. And I can leave the link to your profile and Scroll in the show notes below as well. I really appreciate you taking the time. All the best with everything moving forward in your work and hopefully for the entire regulatory environment of crypto and blockchain. And let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Thank you, Ashton, and happy building.